pollution. Now, coming from an expert's point of view, what would you say? Let's just hit it the way it is. What would you say is the reason for we can cope most of these challenges? Because we see that it's like a routine. It's like a normal way of life in this part of the world for these things to happen. What would you say leads to that?
Leads to
Pollution.
Oh, well, quite a number of things, and honestly, I don't know where you want to start, because pollution is a subject matter that you can take a whole day, a whole week, a whole month to talk about.
Okay.
So perhaps you ask me about specifics.
Yeah,
You know.
specifically air pollution and
Air
water pollution.
Good, good. Okay, if we look at air pollution,
Okay.
I'd like to first talk about the things common people, you and I, do to pollute the air before we go to the big things, you know. Right from the home, you have domestic pollution, where people tend to cook with firewood, and then they are bothered by the smoke that comes out of it. Firewood emits a lot of carbon, and apart from the effects on the air, it also has a big effect on human health. That's why you have people coughing, people having debilitation of the lungs, you know, emphysema, and all sorts of problems. Because especially now that kerosene has become so expensive, gas has also become so expensive, people are resorting, you know, to firewood. In addition to the problem of deforestation, you know, that you have from that. So right from the home, we pollute the air. And even the use of aerosols, you know, insecticides, you know, sprays, all kinds of things. They also pollute the air, apart from, you know, being dangerous to the humans who breathe in, you know, these pollutants. So quite a number of things can contribute to air pollution in the home before we go on to, you know, the wider society. Then even from the subsistence farming that people engage in. You know, we practice slash and burn agriculture. And that means we cut the bush down, we cut the forest down, and we set it on fire. Now, that pollutes the environment a lot, adding to the temperature rises and quite a number of other things, including even the erosion of the ozone layer. You know, so it's quite a number of problems.
Now, still talking pollution, let's look at some other specifics. We are aware that air pollution has a way of affecting human health.
That's right.
In specifically human health. Now, would you say the actions of man contributing to this is deliberate or something ingrained in his subconscious that he just does without thinking?
Well, I think it's a function of the state of our education and awareness. You know, quite a number of things that people do, they may not know that they are polluting the environment. And more so, they may not even know that they are endangering their very lives. Okay, so it's something that we do in environmental communication, you know, trying to create awareness. In the media, perhaps that's why I'm even here. You know, create awareness about the things that people do, things that communities do, and things that nations do to pollute the air. And it takes a lot beyond education and awareness, like policies for government to bear down on some of these problems, to make sure people are not only aware, but they're also willing to take actions, you know, that can lead to the remediation of some of these problems.
Okay, you talked about policies right now. Let's take up from there. I wanted to enlighten the public a little more. I know you're a lecturer already, you're teaching students about these issues. What are the policies that are put in place for regulating this air pollution?
Well, we are familiar with what they used to call the Kyoto Protocol. And even the climate change policies. You know, our president even just came back from Glasgow, okay, where he held meetings with other heads of state and agencies, to talk about what nations can do to cut down on carbon emissions. So Nigeria has policies on air pollution. Nigeria is a signatory to many treaties, many protocols, and all that, that are supposed to regulate, pollution. The problem is how deliberate are we, in making sure these policies are implemented. Because you look at the industries, okay? How do they pollute the air? They send their effluents into the skies. Nigeria is a major oil-producing nation, but all around the 9 states that make up the Niger Delta region. The place is dotted with companies that flare gas on a daily basis. And it's not as if Nigeria does not have a policy, to perhaps monetize its gas. But the companies may not be interested because of the cost. So it's easier to flare the gas and contribute so much to air pollution. So it's not as if we keep pushing, up the deadlines. We say, 2030, say 2050, 2060, 2070. No, as if we'll never get there. So it is time, for instance, for our country to be very serious about either taxing the companies for flaring the gas or injecting funds, even from abroad, to make sure our gas is monetized. Because we have domestic and industrial needs, for gas. Yet we flare gas on a daily basis. And we are one of the world's biggest gas flaring nations on earth. In countries where you have these companies as home companies there, they are not allowed to do those things. So maybe because of our developing status, we are not bearing down on companies and institutions that pollute the air, including, government itself, because even the cars we drive, we have millions of cars in Nigeria, and they contribute so much to air pollution because they emit carbons.
So, okay, now let me take you on that aspect you just spoke about has to do with the industries. Now, taking you back to individuals, do you think there's a way an average person can stop habits that causes pollution in the air or in the water?
Yes. It will depend on the state of the individual's education and the willingness to contribute to environmental cleanliness. Now, take for instance, people who even smoke tobacco.
Yes.
And that's a major way individuals contribute to air pollution. And then also thinking about the health effects of smoking tobacco. So, and some of these habits are addictive. Nicotine is an addictive substance. And the individual has to be eminently aware of the health hazards that these things pose, and then determine and perhaps seek help from medical personnel on how to stop, the habit. Then individuals, poverty is also a major problem because there's a nexus, between poverty and environmental pollution. Now, I know that it is dangerous perhaps to cook with firewood. I know that it is dangerous to cook with kerosene. I know that it is dangerous to have a multiplicity of these generators, in our homes. You have a home of 10 tenants, and each of them has, a generator, all spewing, carbon into the atmosphere. Now, so apart from not being able to afford, the costlier but slightly cleaner fuels, poverty is a contributor. So the individual may know that cutting down the forest, all right, to use firewood in, burning, cooking, essential, but the circumstances, the financial circumstances may not. So the government again comes in, how to empower people, so that they can afford, cleaner sources of energy. I'm not even talking about renewable energies that are, quite friendly to the environment.
Yeah.
Okay, so individuals can do quite a lot.
Okay.
But again, the prevailing circumstances around them may hamper them, from doing what they know is right.
Now, there are some set of people who actually feel that cooking with firewood is the food you cook with
Makes the
firewood
food tastier.
Tastes better.
Exactly, tastes better than
I've heard that
than
before.
the cooker and all of that.
Yeah.
So it sometimes might not necessarily be issues that has to do with money or probably because you even have people who have the money still prefer to cook some kind of dishes, especially local dishes like a bangkok and all of that. So you still prefer to go the firewood way. So how do you marry that?
Well, I think it's in the mind.
Okay.
It's in the mind. Yeah, because these same people travel abroad or live abroad. They don't ever get to cook with firewood, but they still enjoy their meals. Okay? So it's a question of weighing the tasty part of the food with the dangers, all right, that are posed to the environment. And then when you know that the balance tilts greater towards the other danger, you may try to. It's not convenient to cook with firewood because the smoke gets into the air, gets into the chest, makes you cough and all that. So when people can really afford to change, they can do that.
Now, let's take a look at water pollution.
Good.
Now, you get to see a lot of people who are in the riverine areas doing, taking actions that are very detrimental to health and to the environment and to the water bodies too.
Okay.
Because these water bodies, they are not humans that could cry out danger and all that.
Yeah.
Now we know that these actions are grievous and very bad. What gospel should we preach to these people? Because I think a lot of them do not have maybe a convenient way of disposing things, maybe, and then they tend to dump it there. Maybe let's say there's a fisherman paddling, and then he just wants to urinate and he just flushes it down there or something. Now, what are the preventive measures they could actually take?
Well, it's a big problem.
Yes, sir.
Disposing wastes into the water bodies, and it's been going on for centuries, especially in the riverine areas. But people actually think that because the water can hide, right, that they are receptacles for waste. But even under the water, you have lives, and those lives are also entitled to a living.
Yeah.
So it's also a question of educating people.
Yeah.
And then making provisions for alternatives. Okay, I think during my youth service, I was in Bielsa. And people will travel in the morning to the seaside and dump it, and the fishes will just jump up and catch it.
Yeah.
And that's even more serious because the thing gets back to us. When we do it, we may also do it with dangerous microorganisms, that can cause typhoid fevers, that can cause diarrhea, dysentery, cholera, and all sorts of things. It's just like open defecation, but that one pollutes the land, okay, and the air. But people generally think that because the water can submerge things, so we just throw them there and forget about them. But people need to change. And I think it's a question of education, because when we go to toilet in the seas or we dump plastics, that's even a more dangerous thing too, because microplastics, maybe not even the water bottles and all that, but each plastic substance also emits micro plastics. Those we don't see them. All right, we don't see them because any plastic will wear off eventually and float in the air and also get into the water. And water creatures take them in, okay? And we take these water creatures as food. So it gets back into the food chain. And if they're also toxic, they can cause cancers and quite a number of other problems. So people need to know this because people usually do not know. They just think that, you throw it away, it's out of sight, you forget about them. So I think it is wise for NGOs, for schools, that's why environmental studies, right? They are being introduced into the school curriculum so that children can also learn. Even in adult education classes, they should be taught. In village settings, in community settings, people should be taught that dumping refuse, dumping plastics, dumping metals, dumping plastics, glass or materials in the water bodies are dangerous because they also do what? They stop the creatures from surviving. And the most important thing is that humans, live by the grace of these creatures. So when you endanger the lives under the water, you invariably endanger your own lives. So it's a question of sustainability and human livelihood. We depend on water, we depend on air, we depend on land, we depend on all these natural resources to survive. So when we endanger those environments, we are invariably shortchanging our lives.
All right, sir. We'll take a short break, but before then, I would pose a question. I'll let you think about it. Then when we come back from the break, we'll get your response. I'm going to talk about, I don't know, on your way here, did you pass through your village road? Did you see the refuse site?
Yes, I did. I saw more of the erosion site.
We'll get back to that. All right, let's take a short break, and when we come back, the show continues. Please stay. Don't go anywhere. Alright, it's great to have you back. In case you're just joining in, this is Rise and Shine, which is from the stable of Spectrum Television right here and the beautiful hills of Ibiakuran. And yes, we've been playing host to a gentleman in the studio who's been doing justice to this environmental issue that we've been discussing with special reference to air and water pollution. Welcome back to the studio. So, Sam, just before the break, I did ask a question about special concerns with reference to your village road, the dump sites there. Many times we drive past that place and we have to wind all the way up. And sometimes even when you do, the smell still goes right in and somehow gets you. Now, what exactly, in your own opinion, how would you rate that guy? No, we know that they're trying to solve a problem.
So what's the best possible way?
Okay, hang on. We know they're trying to solve a problem of waste disposal.
That's right.
But then again, we're still creating another problem. So how do we marry these two extremities?
Yes, as I said, the Environment Commissioner the other day tried to say what efforts government is trying to put up to correct the problem. But it's not just about Uyo Village Road.
Okay.
The local government areas, the villages, the state capital, and the nation at large, we are not properly managing our solid wastes. And so you have them collecting the refuse from one location and dumping that in another location. So the thing that we can do is to try and develop a recycling culture. Now, it's not rocket science. It's just trying to set the policies and implementing the policies, because we need to be able to separate our, refuse. Because some of these government officials and people who manage wastes, they've been abroad and I've seen how seamless, these things are done. So right from the home, we need to be able to separate our paper from our plastic, from our metals, and from our puddles. Okay, and so we can even trade them off, because that's the concept of waste to wealth. Now, but when you do not desegregate waste, you put them all together and you put them in, including the biodegradables, those things from the market, the food, leftover foods from our homes, you put them in one place. Honestly, the stench will pose health hazards anywhere. And there are also avenues for rodents and all kinds of dangerous microorganisms to, breed and then get transmitted by air, by water. Because some of this, that dump site you talked about on Uyo Village Road is actually in a ravine. And that ravine also collects water that runs. And that water runs into streams that some people down the country drink or use for bathing or washing. So it is for government to set up clear policies, okay, to tell homes to have receptacles to collect different things, and then there will be agencies to even buy them from individuals, okay, and even if they are not bought, but the waste will be properly managed, and then it is not beyond our country to collect the biodegradables and even turn that into gas. Because by the time you turn that thing you collect from the market and from homes into a soup pot and introduce some microorganisms, in a closed environment without air, they generate gas that you can use for homes, for industries, for offices, and all that. So it's something that can be done. But we haven't yet, summed up the courage and then the political will to do that. It doesn't take anything. When you go to a conference, for instance, especially the kind of conferences that we attend that are environmental, friendly, you have a bin for leftover food, you have a bin for paper, you have a bin for plastics, and then they're all collected. And then there's another thing that you can even monetize. You see all these trees that we plant on Uyo streets. They're not good trees anyway because they don't have large enough leaves to absorb, trees absorb, carbon that will help, filter the air and purify the air. But they're good all the same. But they've become so wild because there's no way to prune them. Big vehicles are the vehicles that prune them for us. But the municipality is supposed to prune them, and then in some places, these pruned branches are chopped into pieces that are used for agriculture. So you don't even need fertilizers, which eventually can also run into water bodies and then pollute the water bodies, make lives for fish and all those things dangerous. So governments and people have a part of it. Local governments should start it, and then should percolate up, to the nation, so that we can properly manage our waste. Individuals play a good role by being aware that bunching waste together, is a dangerous thing to the environment. And then government must set the policies to make sure homes segregate their waste, and then there should be a system, a concrete system to collect this waste, and then encourage companies, empower companies to go into recycling them. You see that people are doing it on an informal basis. They go to the dump and then sift through the trash. But if they were, sorted out, it would make, things quite easy, and more scientific.
Yeah, you have recommended already the area of recycling most of these waste. Now, would you, in your own opinion, say that it would be ideal for government to take that up, or a private body? And we understand that most times government institutions don't actually last term and function properly.
Private people can do it, but government is the regulator. If government doesn't have a policy that institutes a framework, for the operation of these private agencies, they will still be doing things haphazardly. So government still has a role to play. And then, what about the financing? The people may have the technical know-how to do it, but they may not have the financing to operate. So you must have access to credit that you can do it. Some equipment would be involved in the process, and they have to be brought in, and then they cost money. So government, one way or the other, still needs to join in that operation by regulating, by setting down the policy, by investigating rules that are flouted and all that, and then punishing
Very
people
important.
who flout the
Because
rules.
it's one thing to have a policy, it's another thing to enforce it.
That's
Because
crucial.
I'm of the opinion, just like all you say thus far, is the fact that we have policies, there are things on paper
Yeah.
which have not really been enforced, so to speak.
Yeah.
So our problem here is the lacuna between the policies and enforcement.
Okay, so very quickly in your last words, we've talked about what the government can do, but let's look at the people, because we have to contribute to keeping our environment clean. Now, what other ways would you see or ask the people to, the actions that we can take to keep away from air pollution, to stop polluting the air and also stop polluting the water? Now, those are two questions in one. What actions can you take to stop polluting the air, and what actions should you not do to stop polluting the water?
Well, as I said,
Yeah.
there is nothing we are going to be able to say on TV that will capture
Everything.
the entire scenario. I think the simplest route for individual action is self-education. And we live in a world that is suffused with knowledge because we live in the internet age, and people have access to information in their phones. So I would encourage people to read as much as they can about these matters. And then all the actions are there for them to take, what they can do as individuals, what they can do as children, what they can do as parents, what they can do as communities, before we even get to the government. So, but the lack of interest in finding out what can be done is a major problem. And then the willingness to do what is right is another problem. So we need to educate ourselves at the individual level about what we can do at the personal level to contribute to environmental cleanliness.
All right.
Okay.
Very well then.
I think that's what we call it a wrap. Thank you very,
Very
much
much. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
responding to our call. We were speaking with Dr. Herbert Batter. I hope I got that right.
got it
He
right.
is an associate professor
Okay.
of science, health and environmental journalist. Yes, it was nice having you in our studios. I hope we look forward to having you another time.
No problem. I'm available.
Okay,
Great.
Thank you
that's
so
nice.
much.
Okay, that's the
I enjoyed
size
it.
of this
Thank you, sir.
particular interview. Join us shortly after now for the remains of Rise and Shine. Don't go away. Stay.